Broadcast news, people. We're back. Well, I'm back anyway. I was out last week. This week, Dave is out, so I'm joined by Dr. Mike and Josh. Before we jump into the news this week, a couple of quick shout-outs to some people who were nice enough to send us a couple of messages this week. We got a message from Tomek here in Krakow, I believe, reminding us to do a show about the documentary that was released about, 2 weeks ago now on the subject of pedophilia in the church. What's it called in Polish? Tylko nie mów nikomu?
Exactly. Just don't tell anyone.
Just don't tell anyone. Something like 20 million views on YouTube now. And yeah, actually, we're going to do a show on that in the next couple of weeks. So thanks for the message, Tomek. Also, Ron in Tarnov, down the road in Tarnov, Australian Ron. He says that we should do a show or at least a conversation about the Foreigners Office, what we call the Foreigners Office in the local government complex there in Ronda Mogilska, where people go to get their residency cards and things like that. Well, Josh, I guess you're British, and Mike, you have a Polish passport. Do you guys have a reason to go there? I do.
A few times I've been there with friends to help them along, and it's basically just waiting in one line to go stand in another line.
For sure. Josh, have you been to the Foreigners Office?
No, well, I don't know. No,
Despite being a foreigner, you've never been to the Foreigners Office?
EU citizen for the time being.
Interesting. Last time I was there, I have to say, this sounds like an insult in the way that I don't mean it, but it's basically the Ukrainian office. That's what we should call it, because easily 90% of the people processed through there are Ukrainian, and you hear Ukrainian everywhere, and so I call it the Ukrainian office, as a matter of... No offense, Ukrainians. Sorry, we love you, but it is the Foreigners Office, Ukrainian office. Anyway, Ron, thanks for your message. Yeah, we could definitely do a show about how slow it is and how...
Can you understand Ukrainian, John?
Can I understand Ukrainian? I can identify...
I'm at the stage where it's like these people seem to be speaking Polish, but it doesn't actually sound like Polish words.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Ukrainian.
Now, gun to my head, I don't know if I could distinguish Ukrainian from Russian. That's a little harder for me. But yeah, for sure. And of course, glancing at the documents in their hand written in Cyrillic, that's a tip off too. So yeah, for sure.
Who was Cyril?
I don't know. Important enough to have his own alphabet, but. Anyway, guys, thanks for your messages. We're also getting quite a few messages on Facebook as well recently, so thanks for that. Oh, quick reminder, our show this week brought to you by Duffy's Irish Pub, Krakow's only real Irish pub. Good times, great music. You can find it all at Duffy, so make sure you stop by. Say hello to Duffy, the man himself, Fergus Duffy, who was a guest on our show, 3 weeks ago now? Yeah, something like that, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for the confirmation, Josh. Let's jump into the news. Let's talk about the weather, because it's been miserable for a month or so. But as we record this on a Saturday, it's actually a really nice day. Maybe yesterday was the last of the horrible weather, but it rained and rained and rained in the last few days, paralyzed the city, communication just come to a standstill, flooding everywhere. And now we see flooding in the river. Apparently it reached just under 6 meters, which is almost crisis point. Tons of garbage, various debris that the river swept through, the path that it takes, washed up on the riverbanks now, clean up. It's a big mess, guys. What do you think about the flood?
Well, it's something that happens quite regularly here every couple of years, but the big ones happen like every 5 or 6 years. There was, a lot of flooding back in 2010. This year wasn't so bad. We were lucky. I mean, the river did definitely get deeper than it usually is, but we've definitely experienced worse situations than this. Though I did hear a fantastic story the other night. They were putting up some sandbags in one part of town where the river had actually broken over the banks and was flooding a street. And then at 2 a.m, the police got a call that a bunch of drunk guys are basically grabbing and pulling at the sandbags. Who knows why they wanted to steal the sandbags. But, it's kind of like, do you really want to move sandbags that are blocking a wall of water on the other side when you're
Apparently
standing?
They do, yeah.
Hey, guys, free sand. Let's go get it while it's hot. Yeah.
It's like stealing wood by cutting off the branch that you're sitting on.
Yeah. Big mess along the river, of course, lots of property damage. Thankfully, as far as I know, no one's lost their life to the flood, which is not the case when we had the floods in 2010. But, one of the weird side effects of this, guys, is that, in fact, the truth is that oftentimes politicians kind of take advantage of these situations, these disaster situations, because...
Can't let a disaster go to waste.
It gives them a chance to give away money, which is always a good thing, especially when we're approaching election season, yeah?
Exactly. We have the EU elections going on right now, and technically over the weekend there's, Cicha wyborca, so basically the time when they're not allowed to campaign or talk. But the politicians actually said on, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, the prime minister and some other government politicians said, let's suspend the campaign because we have to deal with this problem. And I'm just thinking, they must love this. They can get rid of all the bad press, and then during the weekend when technically they're not allowed to campaign, they can go out there and stand on the dikes and said, thanks to our investments in infrastructure, this river didn't break its banks, or we will help you get more money to fix this thing that was damaged. It's like,
thanks to the Habsburgs, we didn't get flooded. Yeah, and I mean, talking about these elections, there's a bizarre thing where in the UK the vote was on Thursday, but they're not able to reveal the result of the vote until kind of, what is it, midnight on Sunday, when all the other European Union votes are in. So that's, I'm sure, there's no kind of skullduggery will take place there.
No, not at all. So big mess along the river. It's going to take a while to clean it up. There's also a big mess in the Rinnek the last couple of days, but for very different reasons because of Juvenalia.
Oh, an overflow of students.
Overflow of lots of things on the ground, I think.
Lots of fluids, alcoholic and bodily.
Mike, tell everybody listening, for those of you who don't know, Mike, tell us what Juvenalia is all about.
Juvenalia is that special time of year when students can go out drinking.
Not very special, is it?
Yeah. Juvenalia, it's a week-long student event that happens in most college towns in Poland, and it's happening right now in Krakow. The history goes back as far as the 15th century, and apparently it actually started in Krakow, which was a major college town.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's for more than 500 years.
Major drinking town.
Sometimes the rivers flow of water, but usually it's vodka and beer. And, well, the students, it starts off with a big parade of students walking from the student dorms over to the main square. They're all dressed in costumes, fancy dress, playing around, and at noon, the mayor, the president, gives them of the city, that is, gives them the keys to the city. And I've always wondered what the hell the keys to the city are. I mean, can you actually open any doors with it? But this actually starts off a week of partying, concerts, of student events. In the Miasteczko, that's the student dorm area, there'll be a lot of grilling out in the fields between the buildings. They'll be going crazy and just having one more excuse to have fun before they actually have to go and study for their exams that start in about...
Yeah, you mentioned Miasteczko, and again, for those of you listening who don't know what that is, it's on the west side of town, just off Army Krajowie, or Czarnowiejska. Yeah, Czarnowiejska. There's a gathering of, I don't know, could be maybe 15, 20 buildings, student dormitories, and for the longest time, the majority, I couldn't say exactly what percentage, but the majority of Krakow students were concentrated there. But let's say starting, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 years ago, as the kind of the rising tide of prosperity made it possible for more and more people to rent a private apartment, the student population started to kind of spread more evenly throughout the whole city. Wouldn't you say that's a fair thing to say?
That is pretty much true. I mean, there have been more students anyway because they opened up new universities. The old universities like UJ and AGH have actually expanded, so there are more students in general. Because I think the student dorms held somewhere in the league of 30, 40, 50,000 people. But we have students at the peak, I think it's around 200,000 or plus. So, there's a lot of them living here, so they wouldn't fit all in that campus area anyway. So now they've moved into the city, renting out apartments all over the place.
Everywhere. Yeah. So whereas until maybe, a couple, maybe 3 decades ago, the vast majority of Krakow students lived in Miasteczko, today, I don't know what the portion is, but it's a much, much smaller portion, and they're definitely spread evenly throughout the whole city because, again, more people can afford to live or to rent a room in a private apartment, yeah. So anyway, have fun, guys, on Juvenalia. So it comes to an end. Is there an official end of Juvenalia?
I'm not sure exactly, but I think it's 1 week starting from Friday. So we just had the official opening, and it's until next weekend or until next Friday.
Has anyone, sorry to interrupt, has anyone noticed the apparent irony of Juvenalia coming not long after Matura?
I think that's just... never really thought about it that way. But yeah, you have the Matura exams that get you into college, and then a year later... Well,
you're completely infantile, yeah.
You drink yourself half to death, and then once you wake up hungover, you have to start studying and cramming for your final exams. Perfect timing.
Awesome. You mentioned fancy dress. I was on a bus the other day with a couple of guys. Actually, there were 4 or 5 guys dressed as pigs. Wasn't very fancy, actually.
Well, they're checking people's tickets.
Yeah. No. Just riding the bus like me.
Why do you English guys say fancy dress anyway? Because it doesn't sound like you're dressing up in a costume or anything like that. It sounds like fancy dress like I'm coming in a tuxedo or something.
That's an interesting observation. I've always thought kind of like the whole American thing with a costume party kind of. I mean, what, like a swimming costume or?
The fancy dress doesn't necessarily have to be fancy. It can be kind of like...
Well, fancy dress basically means like, looking like a total tool, like pretending to be somebody else.
Well, I can think of no segue to our next subject, so I'll just start it. 500 Plus, this, 2 years old now. 500 Plus is a program started by the government to kind of
bribe people to have
kids, subsidize the cost of having kids. Initially, the rule was that for most people, the payment started on your second child. So if you have 2 kids, you get 500 zlotys a month, 3 kids, 1,000 zlotys a month, 4 kids, 1,500 a month, et cetera, et cetera. There were some exceptions for people who had low incomes. They could get the 500 from the first child. But for most people, it started from the second child. Well, this year, it was proposed by the peace government that they extend that payment to the first child for everybody, and was signed into law, about a week ago, 2 weeks ago now? I think it's supposed to come into effect later this year. Again, maybe coincidence that we have elections this year, maybe not a coincidence.
That's just a coincidence.
And now, Dr. Mike, we have another expansion of the 500 Plus program.
Yes, we do. This has also nothing to do with the elections, but apparently disabled people will be getting 500 zlotys as well. A lot of people might not remember, but last year, a group of disabled people and their carers were protesting up in the Sejm in Warsaw, where they were occupying it, saying, like, we need money because we have adults that are disabled one way or another, and we're caring for them, and we need some kind of financial help. And the government says, we don't have any money, we'll figure something out. The idea was that they also wanted 500 zlotys or more. The government said they had no money, but now, just as the EU elections are happening, just as we know we're going to the election season in the fall, they're saying, we'll figure out something. They haven't given any details, but they said they're going to give 500 zlotys probably starting next year. And we're not sure exactly who will get the 500 zlotys. What a lot of people don't realize is, according to the law, there are more than 3 million people in Poland considered to one degree or another as disabled.
That's 10% of the country.
Yeah, that's...
Actually about 8% of the country, but 8% of the country is disabled.
Disabled to one extent or another. But apparently this benefit will only encompass the people with the most severe disabilities. There's no detail.
Wait a second. Sorry. In Poland, we have something called, it's called renta, which is basically a disability payment. Mm-hmm. Now, is this 500 Plus supposed to supplement that, to replace that? Can you get both? Is it one or the other?
You can get both. I mean, there's the renta that you get if you were disabled from birth, or from childhood. Then it's a small pension that you get from the state. It's not that much. It's a couple hundred zlotys. And this 500 zlotys will be on top of this as well, as an extra benefit.
Okay, so theoretically, some children, they already get the 500 Plus as a child, and if they're designated as having a disability, they get another 500 zlotys for the disability.
If they have the highest degree of disability as well. So, these are people who are paralyzed, blind, and et cetera.
Boy, talk about a bulletproof policy, totally immune from criticism.
Probably going to cost about 3 billion a year. That's
what politician on the other side is going to say, wait a second, you want to do what? No way. These people, no way. They get nothing. Who's going to say that? Nobody.
And the money is apparently going to come from a new tax they're introducing for foreign companies.
For disabled people.
We're going to tax you to give you money. Well, that's basically how it works. Foreign companies that own large shopping centers and stuff like that and stores are going to have to pay an extra tax or something along those lines. Plus, also, people in Poland earning over 1 million zlotys will be asked to pay into a solidarity fund, which will be supposed to be what will fund this extra 3 billion a year for what they're guessing will be about 500,000 people getting this money. So,
Interesting. I just wonder how cynical I wonder how sincere it is, how cynical it is as a political maneuver, as something that, they sincerely want to help society, again, the solidarity. I just don't know. And
I mean, what I think is hilarious or kind of strange is PiS is basically presented as a far-right party all the time, but they're doing all these like welfare and nanny state programs, which are usually associated with more left-leaning parties, giving money away.
We talked about it before, that part of their success is due to the fact that, yes, they have stolen the playbook of the left. And so they bring the social policies and attitudes that they associate with the right, with the spending policies of the left, and it's a winning combination. And so it leaves PO just kind of standing there, just kind of like wondering what they can do to get attention, because it's the kind of the default tactic for the left in Poland and all over Europe. Well, not only Europe actually, has been to spend money. We'll give you more. We're going to spend more on you, and PiS kind of owns that territory now, and it's interesting to see how things are going to turn out. But again, just we're going to give money to disabled people is just.
Oh, just on a side note, because we were talking about the 500 plus.
Yeah.
Did you hear that a few days ago? The first Polish mother gave birth to 6 babies yesterday.
Right here in Krakow.
Ka-ching!
Ka-ching, exactly.
Actually, I think it's because they already have 1 kid as well, so they're going to have 7 kids.
That's so 6 eligible for 500 plus. Actually, no, 7.
No,
sorry,
7, so
so 3,500 a month. I believe me, I can tell you from experience. If I can imagine how many diapers, how much milk they're going to have to buy, it's not a lot of money actually for 6-7 kids. 3,500 zlotys.
You have like a mental picture of like piglets kind of all like scrabbling around.
Yeah, careful, Josh. He said it. Director hate mail to Josh, not us. It's really. Okay, another total lack of segue to our next subject. Interesting story this week about our reptilian prime minister, Morawiecki. Interesting news, Dr. Mike, about a piece of real estate he bought that has dramatically increased in value.
Well, Wyborcza has basically said that back in 2002, I believe, they bought some land, far west near Wrocław, for I think it was about 700,000 zlotys, and Wyborcza, the Polish, the press that's reporting on it, said even then it was worth at least 4 to 6 times more than it was then. I always think it's fine. It's
and just by the way, that's a huge amount of money, but Morawiecki has it. He's very wealthy.
He's well off.
Before he came into government, he was in banking for years.
He was in banking, and his wife as well. So this isn't. They didn't have to steal the money or anything like that. They had a lot of money. The thing is, this land was actually owned by the church that had just a few years earlier regained it back from the state, because the state nationalized a lot of real estate and property during the communist era, and then over the course of the 90s, a lot of it was returned. And the church regained some of this land, which was farmland, and then after a few years sold it off to Morawiecki. And now the value of that land, according to Polish sources, has gone up, another 100-fold. So it's gone from 700,000, and they're claiming it could be worth up to 70 million. I have my doubts.
What kind of land is this? Is there gold underneath it or something?
No, it's I don't know that region, but apparently it's in a very region close to new developments, shopping centers.
Yeah, but 100 times in value.
But I think they're exaggerating. I think they're exaggerating, saying that it was underpriced when he bought it. Maybe he got a slightly better deal because it turns out that the cardinal who was, overseeing this was also a friend of the family. So, and it was known that the church was going to sell this land. And the thing is, it's a friend of a friend. Oh, maybe we'll sell it to you for a slightly better price.
Is it like that thing when the news reports a big drug bust, drugs with a street value of, X million, and then kind of, you have a kilo or whatever of this stuff, but you've got to actually kind of convert it into little 1 gram baggies or whatever to actually, see.
Sure, when they say
not that I really know of.
I was going to say, sounds like a lot about, getting the drugs on the street and kind of distributing.
I've read.
Oh, okay.
Podcasting ain't cheap.
So, Dr. Mike, is there some kind of suggestion of some kind of quid pro quo, we'll cut you a deal, but you owe us a favor or something, or what?
That's what some people are suggesting. Others are saying that he just bought it at a great time, got a good deal, and it's increased in value. And
really good.
This is a guy that has been involved with business, but he wrote the property over to his wife a few years ago. I think,
which means he wouldn't have to disclose it as part of his portfolio.
He basically said, I got into politics and she was still running the business, and he said that he thought it was appropriate that she looked after it because she was into real estate and investments, and he would go into politics. Doesn't sound suspicious at all. Yeah. But this has raised concerns among a lot of politicians, since he was always presented as kind of the technocratic, professional kind of politician.
Managerial type.
Yeah, who wasn't involved in any scandals.
And not the ideologue, just the manager.
And I'm not saying that he has done anything bad, but, just whenever you mention money or investments near a politician, everybody always assumes the worst, even if they haven't done anything. Sure. And politicians now on the other side are saying, okay, we should bring in new legislation saying that, even the spouses of politicians, at least on higher ministerial levels, need to also disclose their financial holdings.
Shouldn't be allowed to own land near Wrocław, yeah.
While now Kaczynski, PiS's leader, has basically said, okay, we'll one-up you. We'll introduce legislation that will mean that not only spouses, but also adult children of main party leaders and politicians will also have to disclose, because a lot of times politicians or people that have money will pass it on to their spouses and then to their children. And this is people are getting a little concerned. It's what about, if you're an adult child, your parent is a politician, but you live alone, or you have your own businesses and interests. Why do you have to disclose your private information to the public just because your family member is a politician? It's just a lot of privacy.
It's just part of the culture, the political culture, where it's this constant suspicion, constant accusations of corruption. And this is kind of a staple of the Polish political scene, I think.
I think in Poland generally, not just the political scene, but say in a lot of countries, I think maybe, John, you agree with me, in the U.S. especially, when somebody is well off, the general idea was always that this person worked hard, they had a great idea, they, rose up. Maybe in the last few years, that's kind of not the case, but generally it was like always the American dream that everybody had a chance to like rise up. And if you made a lot of money or were successful, you're presented as a role model in a certain extent. But in Poland, it was never like that. If you had any money, everybody always assumed that you must have done something nefarious to get
I would agree with that, yeah. You must have cut corners. You stole something from the government and sold it off.
There's a measure of that kind of thinking in the UK as well, actually.
I think in Polish, they actually kind of a saying that says like, pierwszy milion trzeba ukraść. Like you have to steal your first million, basically.
Words I live by. Segue, again, totally missing once again. I see a theme developing here. It's an update.
Well, the absence of theme.
Yeah. Let's turn to an update on something we covered, I think, about 2 months ago or so. We broke the news that the building in the middle of Plac Nowy in Kazimierz was going to be renovated and converted into the new home of Ars, the cinema that was Annex Reduta Sztuka, yeah?
Yep.
Which was for years kind of an iconic location in the center of town at the corner of Jana and Tomasza, I think. Yeah. And they lost their home there, and people thought that it would be a good idea for them to relocate to, again, Plac Nowy. Everything was set. That was green-lighted by the government. It was supposed to be a done deal. And we've learned this week that it's not going to happen. It's fallen through for various financial, organizational, maybe political reasons. If you've been by there recently, you may have noticed that there is work going on in the middle of this building, along the outer edge where you get your Zapiekanka. That's kind of the same as it's always been, but there is a little entrance to the whole building, I guess, on the north side of it. And you can smell fresh paint and lots of people coming in and out, construction worker types. And they're basically done. So I'm not sure what the inside of it looks like or how much space there is, or what they're going to do with it now. But first, let's take this in two parts. First, the Ars dream is dead, guys. What do you make of that? Disappointed? Don't care? What do you think?
Kind of on the don't care thing. I remember going to that group of cinemas, movie theaters back in the day, before the multiplexes opened up in Krakow. It was one of the most centrally located ones, the old center of town, but it wasn't very good. They didn't have the best screen. They didn't have the best seats or sound system. Only in their later days, they finally started to invest in that. But by that time, people were going to the multiplexes. So it became kind of like an art house.
It was old. Without the charm of being old, it was just old.
Yeah, exactly. So, and now that building is being apparently turned into a hotel, hostel, restaurant,
another one, yeah. Right.
So all the movies movie theaters had to move out, and Ars was the one that was supposed to relocate. And
Josh, wouldn't it be cool to go see a movie in the middle of Plac Nowy, or not so much?
Theoretically, yeah. I think it would probably be one of those things like, hey, just around the corner there's a cinema, and it shows all sorts of films. And how often do you go there? Yeah, didn't.
But looking at that building from the outside, I tried to imagine what it might look like on the inside. I just don't see the space. That building is not that big.
You're going to fit maybe 24 people in there, something along those lines. And considering that you also have the equipment, the projector, the screen, the seating, it's going to be a very intimate kind of venue.
Yeah.
Well, let's stick on the same subject, but kind of bigger picture stuff. The fact that the deal has fallen through kind of puts us back to square one. And, what to do with Plac Nowy, and that building in particular, has been a constant topic of conversation. And back in 2009, the city government came up with what was supposed to be the definitive plan for the future look and future organization of Plac Nowy. And that plan is still on the drawing board itself. And they love to make plans. They love to have people, they love to commission kind of, groups and various experts to kind of give their input and their vision for what the area should look like. And they always have great ideas, but nothing ever really gets done. And I'm curious to know why that is.
I have no idea. It's like they've wanted to basically, with the exception of that building, bulldoze everything and bring in a new design, flat, because right now the center part of that square is a few steps higher than the road going around it. They want to level that all out. You make it uniform, get rid of those big rusted kind of tin roofs where you have the market every other day, and bring in like some uniform buildings. Just make it look pretty. And it just hasn't gone anywhere. You have the new kebab shops there, which have popped up, and that's pretty much it.
Josh, let me get your take on this. Okay, on the one hand, super valuable real estate, lots of people traffic, and so the obvious kind of solution would be to redevelop the whole thing, kind of like on the model of that building with the, what's it called, Platz Novi 1 with the bowling alley.
Oh, yeah.
Make the whole area like that, basically. Again,
well, I think what you have is
right in the center of town, develop it all, make it super nice. On the other hand, there are people who say that Kazimier's charm is very much associated with the fact that it is rough around the edges. It is dirty. It is kind of disorganized and old and chaotic. And so keep it like that because that's what makes it cool. Where do you see the balance between these two?
Well, it's a good point really, because I mean there's a whole kind of slew of kind of conflicting interests really. Like on the one hand, there's the huge amount of money to be gained from tourists. People like to sit around the square, so it's nice weather, sit outside. You want to people watch and stuff. And at the moment, there's parked cars and these ugly tin roofs and it's, you look at it and you think, oh man, let's clear this all away, just have that building in the middle and then like a nice piazza and maybe even more chairs and tables for, sipping cocktails and drinking coffee. But then, the market on a Sunday, which is, not like a regular market where there are actual stalls being occupied. I mean, there are actually little kind of postage stamp, allocations of space. So, if you have fixed structures on the market, then that's going to impede those. I don't know what the rights of the people who sell stuff on the Sunday market is.
Well, you mentioned, the flea market. Is it just on Sundays? I thought it was every day. Or almost.
The flea market is just on Sundays.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the flea market.
And Sunday morning. Yeah.
Vegetable market over there. These are the little things that make the whole area a little quirky, give it its charm, give it its personality. And, a lot of people don't want to see a Starbucks there, for example. Starbucks being kind of the default avatar for development generally, but again, it's the region is too valuable, too well situated, too well located. There's too much people traffic going over there. The development's going to take place one way or another, either locale by locale, building by building, or as part of a larger overall plan for the development of the whole city. Isn't it better for someone to take charge and say, we want to manage this? And make sure it's, make sure we kind of preserve the character while still kind of having a general overall strategy for what it's supposed to look like. Isn't that better for the government to do something than to kind of like let it sit back and kind of roll the dice and see whatever happens?
I would think so. And just help.
Does that make any sense, what I just said?
Just evening it out, just because getting rid of the cracks in the pavement, which shouldn't be such a big deal. They haven't been able to take care of that. And right now you can walk around there, especially in the dark, break your leg because there's, some place where you have like 2 or 3 steps to go up, then you hit a pothole, then all of a sudden it's even, then you have to go down. It's horrible to walk around in the dark.
Well, it's that whole manhole cover sweepstake that takes place outside of a couple of bars, when how many people have to walk by before someone trips over the protruding, manhole.
I kind of think the area would benefit from something they implemented on Florianska Street years ago. That is some consistency with the signage. In terms of, what kind of signs are allowed, electric lighting and neon and this kind of stuff. And some kind of, functional, of course, but also a little bit of an artistic touch. It cleans it up a little bit, gives the street a bit of uniformity, and not in the negative sense, but in the positive sense.
Do you think there's I don't know. I don't see any issue with the signage, though. I mean, it is.
Well, but when you have businesses selling, kebabs and the various things, and, they light up and they're modern signs on old buildings, and they're kind of, it's not consistent with the look of it becomes a free-for-all. It's just anything and everything. Nice signs that are well done, other signs that are cheaply made. It looks like crap, I think. I don't know. It's me talking, but nobody agrees? Nobody cares? I'll take the dead.
I was trying to think, is there a kebab place on Platz Novi? I never noticed that.
Well, we'll see what happens with Ars and where they end up and how the building in the middle of Platz Novi goes.
On there, yeah.
Something else in local news. We mentioned a couple of episodes back something about the grilling culture here in Poland, and that it's pretty energetic and people love their kielbasa on the summer grill with a nice beer. But kind of an interesting corollary to that was in the news this week when one of the local city councilors in Krakow says he wants to change the law to make it possible for people to grill in parks, in city parks. And this brings up the interesting question of where you are and are not allowed to grill. And city parks, public parks is one of them. You can't just set up your own grill. And another interesting place you're not allowed to grill that plenty of people do is your balcony. You know, lots of people here have balconies, living in blocks and whatnot. Technically, according to the law, you're not allowed to grill on your balcony. Again, people do. I know this because I've done it a couple of times before I knew about the regulation, by the way. Now I understand why it's in place. And when my neighbors grill on the balcony, it irritates me, but I remember when I did it myself. Anyway, where are you supposed to enjoy your summer grill if there are very few places when you're allowed to grill?
I've always heard a lot of conflicting information about whether or not you are allowed to grill. What I've generally heard is that in public green areas, you are allowed to grill, but in certain parks, like Lasvolsky and stuff like that, you are not allowed to grill. But technically, there should.
So where would be a place, in your understanding, where would be a place where you think you should be able to grill?
For instance, we grill there a lot, and I'm pretty sure it's legal. Is Kopiec?
Pretty sure.
Is Kopiec Kraka, the one by Podgórze?
Yeah.
Or is that in Wanda? I always get them confused.
Well, no, that's in Podgórze is Kraka. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wanda's
it's a really nice area, great view of the town. It's easy to get to, and we grill there regularly during the season. And
I don't think you can. Low risk of getting caught, but I mean, what kind of grill are you taking there? Like
those
tiny,
one-time use ones you get.
Okay, that's no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think you take a proper grill there in your van or whatever. Somehow get it up the hill.
Bricks and sand and cement.
I don't think you can do that.
That's what they wanted the sand for. Yeah.
We've also grilled, but this is already private property, I think, at Kryspinov. Like where, the water area where you can actually go swimming, but you have to pay to get in. And we've taken our grill there. Like we've had either the one-time use one, in throwaway ones, or like the really cheap ones you buy for like 30 zlotys.
I think that might be a case of it's de facto allowed and de facto legal because so many people are doing it, and the cops can't stop 400 people from not grilling if they want to. So it's inconsistent.
Yeah, but the council member that you were talking about here is he apparently has suggested like designated areas which will be prepared with facilities to throw away whatever you've grilled to a crisp char or so who knows? But even if they introduce the law, it's going to take 2 years before it can be implemented, and we're already in grill season right now. So he took too long with this idea.
You ever grill on your balcony?
Don't have a balcony.
You've never had a balcony here?
No, but like my parents have a terrace,
okay.
But that's a backyard, so that's a house. But on a balcony here, I've grilled at friends' balconies more than once. I always thought it was more had to do with like the actual building regulation would say whether or not.
No, citywide.
Okay, citywide.
Citywide.
I've got actually it doesn't live that far from you, John. Who one of those sort of modern but quite high-rise kind of things. I was there in the summertime, and there's other blocks adjacent, and they've all got balconies, and there was this kind of pall of smoke, kind of, the kind of pervasive.
The last time I did it, I did start to wonder as I watched the smoke rise and kind of drift inside the windows of people who lived around me. I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe this is not such a good idea. Even if it's not legal, it's probably an asshole thing to do. And yeah, it is an asshole thing to do.
But you're right. There is a grilling culture in Poland. But this just reminds me of like the last time I was in Australia. I noticed how almost all the newer buildings that had balconies actually had gas lines available on your balcony, so you could actually take your gas grill out onto your small balcony and plug it in right there. So it was
well, the Aussies take it seriously, don't they? So I wouldn't mess with their grilling rights. Right to grill, fundamental human right. Well, we'll see how it turns out. But in the meantime, be careful where you take your grill. Last thing we're going to cover today. Interesting subject. Dolny Młynów. That's the development over there on, it's Dolny Młynów, the street. That's why they call it that. But
in the name.
Anyway, what is it? About 5 or 7 years ago, it became one of the real hubs of the local nightlife scene. And it's on the grounds of a former a cigarette factory that was empty for some time before the nightlife showed up. And, this is after the nightlife kind of migrated, from Kazimierz to Podgórze, and then the Dolny Młynów popped up and is phenomenally successful. Maybe 20 plus locales there, bars and restaurants.
Bars, restaurants, cafes, everything is there.
And believe it or not, for those of you listening who didn't know this, believe it or not, Dolny Młynów has always been on very shaky, vague, legal ground. It was meant to be kind of a temporary thing at the beginning, wasn't it, Dr. Mike?
Yeah, if you go there, you can see that whoever invested in those cafes and bars didn't put that much money into it. It's like IKEA furniture, minimum installation, everything that just, to health and safety things on a minimum. But apparently they made their money back within a season or two. But you have one company that leases out all that terrain from the owners and then rents out what they lease to all the separate cafes and bars and clubs. And, they're apparently making a lot of money, while the company that owns it, a Spanish company, has now, said like, maybe it's time for the lease to
It's
end.
really complicated. It's really complicated. It's one of the situations where one company owns the land, another company owns the facilities on the land, and it's in the news this week because, this representatives from the Spanish company that owns the entire facility, they came here because they said it was time for a soil test to be done. Because of the chemicals used there for many decades when it was a cigarette factory. Environmental regulations mean that they have to replace the soil somehow. I don't know how you do that, but that's what they have to do. And so it's one of the early basic steps towards a larger project for the whole area that they have planned, which consists of apartments, surprise, office space, the usual shopping and retail facilities and whatnot. So, the whole nightlife scene, there was supposed to be kind of a stopgap measure, something to do with the property until they got the ball rolling on the redevelopment of the whole piece of property. And the Spanish came here to kind of try to push the ball forward and get things done. Well, representatives from the company that owned the facility, what used to be the tobacco company, suddenly they have different ideas about this deal, and they're not happy to see it go forward. They're dragging their feet on it, and in fact, just this week, they even got so silly that they got some gentlemen to come out and physically intimidate the representatives of the Spanish company, to kind of persuade them to go away and forget about this whole thing about developing their piece of property, basically to piss off back to Spain. And this is where we are now. Certainly going to go to court. It's been in court for years, by the way. From time to time you see something in the news about some small progress made in one of the cases. Eventually, I guess they'll win. But I guess the point is, guys, if don't buy stock in the companies that run the bars and restaurants at Dolnuk Munov.
Yes, don't invest too emotionally because that place is not going to be around there for a while. But I think it is hilarious that thugs are basically protecting hipsters right now.
Strange alliance, huh?
Yeah.
Looking forward into the future, let's say 2, 3, 5 years from now, they get it situated, resolved, and the Spanish are going to win. It's their property. And they start, building the inevitable, upscale apartment buildings and office space and whatnot. What does this mean for Krakow's nightlife scene? Because Dolnuk Munov is, in many ways, the epicenter of everything outside of the Stare Miasto. I think it seems nearly. I was going to say it's nearly as big as Kazimierz. That might be a bit of a stretch. But if you take the tourist out of the equation, I think it is a second place to the.
Oh, it probably. Yeah, I think for going out. Yeah, I mean, I don't spend much time up there, but when I have been there in the summer in the past, it's a large area.
It's a large area,
crawling with people. Yeah,
a lot of outside seating area, and it's those old nice buildings, 19th century, early 20th century buildings, which just kind of look nice to hang out. I mean, it's definitely hipsterish.
Very few tourists.
I think. I mean, what will happen? I would have thought is there's developments down by Zabocha, isn't there, and that whole area that'll probably start to take off even more.
Well, that's hipster central because that's where they work. That's where they work.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them live there as well.
Company. So, where does the nightlife migrate if Dolnuk Munov is closed down?
Dolnuk Munov is just perfectly located, close to student dorms. Yeah. It's a large area, so you can get a lot of bars and clubs all together because nightlife works well when it's centralized, when there's a lot of places close together. There aren't too many properties like that left around Krakow without going too far out or somewhere else.
Does it seem to you guys that, and again, you know better than I do because I don't go out that much. That sounds like I'm suggesting that you guys drink more than I do, but you do. But anyway.
You sound like you've been drinking a lot last night.
No, yeah, sorry for my voice. I'm getting sick today. But,
karaoke lasted till 6 a.m.
But I have the impression that Podgorja, the other side of the new pedestrian bridge, it never really took off in the way that many people expected it to. Yeah, there are places there, absolutely, and it's nice. But it seems that it reached a certain point and it stopped.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I was thinking that maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and then I don't know, like the last couple of summers, I thought, no, there's more in the way of. I mean, okay, it's still limited, but there's a whole drag next to the build up to the footbridge of little cafes.
But that's on the Kazimierz side.
No, on the Podgorja
side.
Yeah.
There's not much really.
There's a spattering, but it's not enough yet to get that spark going to really have, because like Dolnuk Munov, like I was saying, it has a lot of things really close together, and that once you have a high enough concentration, it just kind of starts going with its own.
And it's how people walk around as well, isn't it? I mean, you have here in Kazimierz, you've got kind of Platznowy in the immediate kind of vicinity. There are always people walking around there, but we've seen people set up in business maybe a couple of streets away, and just there's no foot traffic. I mean, we're talking with Fergie about Duffy's last week. Wawrzyńca is gone from being one of those streets which was the kiss of death commercially to now it's a major thoroughfare. But,
for sure. Kind of like Mostowa, which is the street I thought you were talking about on Kazimierz.
Right, yeah. Well, yes, no, but that is a good example.
Mostowa's
I mean, the bridge
really
completely
nice.
made that street.
And, go back in time, 5-7 years ago, it was nothing like what it is today. And I just kind of expected it to go further on the Podgorza side. But when you think about it, I think they might be physically kind of limited, because once you get on the other side of the bridge, you go another 100 meters, and there's Limanovskiego, which is acts as kind of a wall.
There's stuff going on there. I mean, they want to kind of. They have been freshening up the market triangle in Podgorza, and I think there's. I mean, I don't know what the plans are, but it seemed to me for a long time that the buildings on the east side of Rynek Podgorski, which are government buildings at the moment, but they're prime locations for kind of pavement cafes and stuff. They get the sun in the afternoon, and it would be...
Who knows, in this city, 15 years from now, the whole place will be one big bar. I have no idea. Or one big apartment complex or office complex or something like that. Anyway, once again, if you like Donut Munov, you better enjoy it now, because the clock is definitely ticking, and might last for another year, might last for another 3 or 4 years, but it's going to go away one of these days, because it was never supposed to last this long to begin with, but we'll see. Well, guys, that's going to bring another episode of the Crackhouse News to an end. Thanks for listening. Remember to drop by.
Oh, and Dave isn't here. Dave isn't here to interrupt you when you're...
so that's why you step in.
Yeah,
yeah, Dave's not here to interrupt. So Josh kindly stepped up to the plate. Thanks for that. Don't forget to, again, go see our friend Fergus Duffy at Duffy's Irish Bar in Kazimierz. Give us a like on Facebook. Make sure you share, tweet, like. What are the kids doing?
Subscribe.
Comment, subscribe. Is that everything? Just get the word out. You know what to do. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the news.